Good evening and welcome to The Right Side, the show where we talk about today's news, views, trends, and opinions from an admittedly conservative perspective. I'm your host, Chris Pareja, and I'm joined this evening by Evan Sayet. He's a stand-up comedian with a conservative bent to many of his routines. He's also the author of a recent book, The KinderGarden of Eden, and we're going to talk about both this evening. Evan, thanks for joining us.
Chris, thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about, with today's political climate, why you would choose comedic jobs when there's not really much funny going on from many perspectives.
Look, there's always stuff that's funny. Even in the worst of situations, there's gallows humor. But it was Saul Alinsky who recognized that ridicule is a powerful weapon. So I was out of stand-up comedy. I mean, I had segued from my earlier incarnation as not a liberal comedian, not a political comedian, but a brain-dead liberal who was a comedian into television writing and then producing. I mean, I was out of stand-up. Post 9/11, and we can talk about my transformation later, but when I realized this is a culture war and I'm on the right side of it, I didn't realize I was on the right side of it. I said, what skill, what weapon do I bring to this war that our side is missing? And I said, we don't have a Bill Maher from the right. You know, I wrote Politically Incorrect for 6 years. So I got back into stand-up only as a weapon, only to fight this war. It really wasn't that there was any continuity to my being a stand-up. I was out of it.
Mm-hmm. And so what was it about 9/11 that made you feel like now you were going to be a comic warrior?
Well, first I had to realize that, look, you grow up in the area and the time and the place that I did, and the demographic Jew that I did, and liberal is not an intellectual position. It's what my friend Andrew Breitbart would call the default factory setting. All right, you just knew growing up basically everything that liberals tend to know, which is that Democrats are good and Republicans are evil. I'm good. I must be a Democrat. I must be a liberal. You know, Democrats like peace. Republicans like war because war is good for business. Well, I like peace. I must be a liberal. You know, Democrats like the air. Republicans don't like the air. They pollute the air. They don't breathe the air. You don't think it through. You just know that Democrats like the environment. Well, I like air, so I must be a Democrat.
Right.
Then I call myself a 9/13 Republican. Right? 9/11 didn't surprise me. Right? Obviously, I didn't know the date. I didn't know the target. The carnage sickened me. But even as a brain-dead liberal, I knew just enough about the world to know that the same people who were murdering the Jews of Israel for no other reason than they were the closest infidels, right? Who were murdering Hindus in India for no other reason that they were the closest infidels, who were murdering children in Beslan, Russia, for no other reason they were the closest infidels, would, when they could, come and kill the big infidel, the great Satan. Right? They just had these big oceans they couldn't cross. So when these attacks took place, what really surprised me were not the attacks. It was the liberals' response to the attacks, that we provoked them. You know, in the words of Jeremiah Wright, President Obama's spiritual mentor, that it was the chickens coming home to roost. Right? There was a college professor who was teaching that we deserve, all of us deserve to be burned alive in our places of employment because every one of us is a little Eichmann, the architect of the Holocaust. And there was no outrage. In fact, not only was no outrage from the left, but this professor, Ward Churchill, actually got more invitations to speak on college campuses after he said that. This boggled my mind. I mean, aren't these the people we're supposed to, as liberals, hate the most? Religious fanatics who murder innocents? And here they were making the most ridiculous anti-American statements, and I had to figure out, one, where do I go to find an ally? Because it really doesn't matter where you stand on abortion if you're dead. I knew we had to fight Islamic fascism. Now that it was here in our country, we had to fight it. Who were going to be my allies? So I went to a Republican meeting expecting to disagree with them on everything, expected them to be everything that I was taught they were, bigots and racists and homophobes and xenophobes. And you know what? They actually had the most articulate and thoughtful reasons for everything they believed. It dawned on me, I don't know a Democrat. I don't know a single person who votes Democrat. What I know is a lot of people who vote against Republicans because Republicans are evil and homophobe and xenophobe and Nazis and fascists. And no matter how bad the Democrats are, well, they're not going to vote for Hitler.
Right. And so, but many people never get the opportunity to hear that articulately stated position
well,
on many of these issues.
Where would somebody my age have heard it? There are three, and I know this is the wrong word, but I like to pronounce the wrong word incorrectly. There are three mediums that the liberal hates. There's Fox News, there's conservative talk radio, and there's the internet. There's the blogosphere. Right? Fox News is only 15 years old. Right? I'm 53 years old. Don't make me do the math. It's something like I was 38 years old before there was a single television news channel that the liberal doesn't agree with. Right? If you want to time the advent of conservative talk radio, the phenomenon, to the syndication of Rush Limbaugh, that's 20 years ago. All right, so that means that I was 33. I was through with all my education that they used to indoctrinate me. I was 10 years into my career. I had my wife. I had my children by that point. And that was before there was a single radio or television show that the liberals could disagree with. Then there's the blogosphere. Well, what year did Al Gore invent the internet? Right? 90-something, and then it took another. It was 2004 before Dan Rather was caught trying to steal the election by using forged documents. All right? So where would somebody like my favorite cousin, who's not all that interested in politics, he has a life, he has a family, he has a job that he goes to, where would he have heard a conservative giving the conservative point of view? Because all I'd ever had is liberals telling me what conservatives believe, and we believe in racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, and all the others.
Right. And so all of that obviously increased your internal anxiety and need to release, and that's why many of us...
I would say exactly the opposite. I think what it did was it actually focused me and made the world make sense for the first time. And yes, there was a mission that you realize this is you can lose America. You can really, that was impossible growing up. America was America. Everybody else was over there. Russia didn't even have toilet paper. And by the way, this is no small point. And it's huge in my book, The KinderGarden of Eden, How the Modern Liberal Thinks. I mean, that's the subtitle, How the Modern Liberal Thinks. But think about this. From the dawn of time until a day before I was born, every single human being had to worry about disease, hunger, poverty, and physical pain. Mm-hmm. Just before I was born, they eradicated disease. What disease? Smallpox? Chickenpox? Measles? Polio? Right? The flu, which had wiped out 2/3 of a continent not that long ago, was now a 3-day paid vacation. So it didn't matter how smart you were, no matter how stupid or smart you were, you didn't get disease. It was just not on the table. Hunger? If you find $1 in the street today, you can buy 3 days worth of ramen noodles at the 99-cent store. So hunger was off the table for anybody I knew, and virtually everybody in America. Physical pain, you had Vicodin, you had aspirin, so there was really, this utopia suddenly became possible-ish. It seemed like, until you started to get old and then see the damage and see that you had to steal from Social Security and you had to borrow from your kids. You know, Margaret Thatcher has such a great line. She said, socialism is the best form of government ever devised for one generation. It was my generation that stole from their parents and borrowed against their children, and now with Obamacare is stealing from their grandchildren.
Yep. And so putting all that together, how did you make it funny? What did you do? How did you comment? Mm-hmm. It seems that you were using comedy as an outreach to educate. That seems like what your mission is reading about.
To educate and ridicule. Because my career took dual track, and it advanced at exactly the same pace. So at the same time that I said, okay, this is a weapon that needs to be on our side, ridicule and humor. But at the same time, I needed to figure out how good, decent people will ignore the facts. America is not imperialist. We're not this evil nation that they say we are. And shut down logic. If we're imperialists after World War II and we had the bomb and the whole world was lying at our feet, why didn't we take over the world? Why didn't we just say, Europe, you're ours, we got this bomb, we'll use it on you? Why did we let Russia get to the point where they had the bomb? You know what, imperialists, after World War II, we didn't even take over Canada. So there's the facts and the logic, and it's known by the left. Mm-hmm. You know, we were talking off camera earlier about Springsteen. And he has this song where he's offering the definitive explanation, the definitive storyline for what it is to be born in the USA. And every word of it is a lie about him. Every word of it is a lie. And he gets to this one point where he says, got in a little hometown jam, so they stuck a rifle in my hand, sent me off to a foreign land to go and kill the yellow man. Right? So the Vietnam War is a racist war. That's what the liberals have, 1, 2, 3, 4. We don't want your racist war. But even Springsteen, even an idiot, had to have known that the North Vietnamese had yellow skin too. So before calling this great nation and that we would send our children to die to kill people based on their skin color, why didn't he give even a nanosecond's worth of thought to say, wait a second, if they're both yellow, maybe it's not the color of their skin that is the issue. Let me look into this a little further before I slander America in a definitive song that's going to be heard all around the globe. I had to know this. And so I began to research, think, debate, discuss the serious understanding, which is the KinderGarden of Eden, how the modern liberal thinks, and at the same time doing the comedy. And they progressed from local speaking engagements to regional to national. Exactly. I did CPAC as a comedian for the first time, the big national conservative convention at the big Reagan dinner, and the next day walked across the street and gave my serious talk to the Heritage Foundation. And that talk to the Heritage Foundation is now the single most viewed lecture in their entire history. Not Ronald Reagan, not Margaret Thatcher.
So what was it that drew people to that speech?
There was a question. Because when you see people making stupid, factually incorrect arguments about things they know. Trayvon Martin was an innocent child gunned down by a white man. Oh, he wasn't white, a white Hispanic. They edit the 9/11 tapes. Why? Why do they lie on behalf of this thug? All right, why? How do you look at the Middle East? All right, and you see this tiny and wonderful liberal, lowercase l, lowercase d, liberal democracy of Israel surrounded by misogynist, homophobic, mass-murdering, corrupt terrorists, and decide to boycott Israel. How do you look at the facts? Now, you can look and say, well, some of them are Marxists and they're trying to overthrow Western civilization. My cousin's not a Marxist. My cousin hasn't given it enough thought. He hasn't read Das Kapital and decided, okay, that's the ideology. So how is it that they blind themselves to the fact? He knows Israel's a liberal democracy. He knows the Muslim world is as horrific as it is. How does he come to this conclusion? And I was able to answer this in a way that rocked the conservative world. Chris, when I went to Washington, D.C. to do the Heritage Foundation, I went as a political unknown into a town where everybody gives a speech every single day. Everybody writes an article and so I went in as a television writer, and I gave this talk, and it was taped. And one person saw it and said, my God, that's Sunday, and sent it out to people, sent it out. It's NRO, National Review Online, said at a certain point, this talk by Evan Sayet, and they linked to it, is cramming our inboxes. Please stop sending it. Because it laid out, and other people called it this. I borrowed this phrase later. But I would say 20 different people would email me, strangers, and say, do you know what you have there? You've got the unified field theory of liberalism. You have just explained everything. And once you know what's in my book, once you know what's in it, everything falls into place.
So that was my next question. So obviously the book came after that, or may have been being written in conjunction, or at least thought out in conjunction. How does the book continue that train of thought? Well,
first of all, it focuses it more as a scientific, once the unified field theory, yeah, it really is. So in the book, it's much more laid out. Here are the 4 laws. Here's how they work. Here's what they came from. This is why they were imposed. This is why. And then in each instance, because a book is, well, this book's only about 140 pages, but a speech runs, 10 pages maybe? So it's 130 pages of expounding, expanding, supporting the points that I was able to make in the original talk.
So tell me, what are the 4 laws?
Let's just do the first 2 because but I'll give you the first one, how it's written in the book, and then I'll explain.
Okay.
Right? The way it's written in the book is the first law of the unified field theory is the modern liberal, and that's somebody born after World War II through today. The modern liberal was raised to believe that indiscriminateness is a moral imperative because its opposite is discrimination. In the 1980s, the first children born after World War II, the hippies and the children of the 60s, who then became the college professors and the entertainers in the 80s, In the 1980s, thinking was outlawed. It was.
Well, at least critical thinking.
Well, right. It was deemed a hate crime. And the concept behind it is anything you believe, Chris, anything I believe, anything your director believes, your camera person believes. I almost said camera woman. Wow. Cameraman. Ooh,
no differentiating.
That's exactly right. The discriminating thought, no differentiating. Anything that you believe, anything I believe, anything anybody believes is going to be so tainted by our prejudices. Prejudices we all have. Prejudices based on the fact that you're a man, that you're tall, that you're short, that you're rich, that you're poor, that you're white, that you're black. Anything you believe is so tainted by your prejudices that the only way not to be a bigot is to never think at all.
Well, or not to think in a way that's contradictory to the thoughts of the collective.
No, not to think at all, which will lead you into the thoughts of the collective. Because the second law is indiscriminateness of thought does not lead to indiscriminateness of beliefs. It leads to siding with evil over good, wrong over right, to Trayvon Martin over George Zimmerman.
Good Hispanic name.
Yes. Well, that's why they thought they had themselves a Jew.
Yes.
That's honest to God. That's why the media went nuts about this. They thought they finally found a Jewish murderer that they could use to show, see, every religion kills.
Yeah.
But it's the reason they support the Islamists over Israel. Because the second law is, if nothing is better than anything else, if no culture is better than any other, then success is unjust. Great success is a great injustice, and long and sustained success is the greatest injustice of all. If there is no difference, you're just not allowed to recognize the difference between Islam and Judaism. Then how come the Jews have Tel Aviv? How come the Jews have symphony orchestras? How come the Jews have all of this? And the Palestinians are mired in crap. If it's not because Islam did it to itself and Judaism built this, if they're equally good because you're not allowed to believe, you're not allowed to think which one's better, then the Jews must have stolen their success and the Palestinians must be oppressed. That's all they need to know. The Jews are successful, the Palestinians are failed. It can't be their culture, so it must be an injustice. And since the Palestinians are hugely failed and the Jews are hugely successful, that injustice must be huge, which is why they single out Israel. It's not because Israel's the worst nation, it's because they're the best. They're the most successful.
Well, there are also religious connotations and everything else, which expands the conversation to another 30 pages in the book,
Yeah,
I'm sure.
It's there. Read the book.
Yeah. So expand a little bit on what those two laws come to mean within the book and within the context. Obviously, if we get into the third and fourth, that might steal the punchline. So
no, not in the slightest. I mean, I don't even remember the third and the fourth at this point. Only because I wrote the book.
You only talk about the first two.
No, but also because in order to do what I've been doing on this last round of talks, which I take the unified field theory of liberalism and I show how it applies to the mainstream media.
Right.
I show how they've gotten literally every major story of our lifetimes, of the modern liberal era, not just wrong, but diametrically opposed to the truth, always their mischaracterizations aiding the image of the evil, failed, and wrong, and undermining the image of the good, right, and successful.
Give us a couple of examples of that, besides Trayvon Martin, obviously.
Well, okay, I'll give you another one. Look how hard they're working to make Benghazi not a terrorist act by Islamic fascists, but the rightful response to the provocation of a video that was made 6 months earlier. You'd have to be a moron to believe that.
And in fact, they admitted that they had nothing to do with anything.
No. The New York Times just came out with a big expose about how it really was the video after all, because Hillary's running, and Hillary's the one who got these people murdered in Benghazi, by her lack of interest in their survival. So there's an example. Okay, look, that's political machinations. That's political maneuvering. But how can my cousin believe it?
The media contributing to that? That doesn't happen, does it?
But not everybody in the media is a radical left-wing liar. So why, Katie Couric is not a Marxist. She's an idiot, okay? She doesn't know Karl Marx from Chico Marx, Groucho Marx, all right? So why would she do it? And the answer's in the book. The answer's in the book. That's all I can say at this point.
Okay.
Shh, it's in the book.
Okay. So what's the solution?
Oh, first of all, forgive me for this, there's no such thing as, in humankind, the solution. Liberals look for the solution. All right? They look for end poverty. We try to better things. We try to ameliorate things, lessen poverty, increase. So just in general, the idea of people say, well, what's your plan? Okay, you don't like Obama plan? What's your plan? I don't have this master plan. I don't believe in master plans. I believe you ameliorate it by allowing cross-state insurance purchases, by tort reform. Will that make everybody have universal health care? No. But there's no such thing as this 5 guys who went to Harvard coming out with a paper this big telling every doctor how to run their business, and it's going to work. So as far as what's the solution, but I do have a couple of plans, and one of them is this. I have a program called Adopt a Democrat. Right? As I said, I don't know anybody who votes Democrat.
Would it require paperwork?
Not at all.
Okay, good, because we don't want to ask anybody for papers.
No, there's no paperwork involved. But everybody has one person in their life who's not a left-wing radical, who just has never heard from a conservative what it is we believe. And so over time, and it's so important, it has to be somebody who you're close with, fairly close with, because they discount anything you say if you're a stranger because you're a Nazi, you're a fascist, you're a Hitler. So it doesn't even matter what, but if they know you, if you're their favorite cousin, you know, if you're their longtime esteemed colleague, if you're their mentor through the year, whatever, it's hard for them to just dismiss you as a racist when they know you're not. So it has to be somebody close in your life, and it's very much like adopting a child. Okay? You don't make everything a teachable moment. It's not every argument, but periodically when they say something truly moronic, like Benghazi, that guy shouldn't have made that video, take the opportunity to point out, and know the facts. You know, when they say something about Trayvon Martin, point out the facts. They was going out that day to buy 2/3 of the ingredients to make drugs. You know, and then over time, and one more, you can let them win a couple of arguments, just like you let your 5-year-old beat you to the front door sometimes, you know. But on the big ones, and over time, I'm telling you, Chris, I have changed maybe 30 people in this way.
Well, it does work out over time.
And think about it. If we all change just one person, we've doubled our numbers.
Yep. So tell us, if people do want to find out more about the book, where can they find out more? Well,
the best place to go, I think, is Evan Sayet, S as in Sam, AYET.com, evansayet.com. My speeches are up there. The book is, buy it through my website. Oops, I just said what I shouldn't have said. I'm so sorry, but I did. Look into it at my website and through my website, evansayet.com.
Great. And they can get in touch with you directly there as well?
Absolutely, Evan at evansayet.com, or there's a link, email Evan.
Okay, great. Well, if you'll hold on for just a moment, we do need to take a quick break to hear from our underwriter, the Conservative Forum.
The Conservative Forum of Silicon Valley began with 20 conservatives meeting at a restaurant in November of 2003. Our mission is to promote the principles of American liberty through education. By 2012, we had grown to over 600 paid members. Our monthly meetings feature well-known and prestigious conservative speakers addressing issues that are critical to our country's very survival. This includes speakers like Victor Davis Hanson, Andrew Breitbart, David Horowitz, and many others. In addition to our monthly meetings, we sponsor a conservative local cable access TV show, The Right Side, covering today's topics. Our Constitution discussion group not only teaches the Constitution, but started our annual essay contest that awards 2 $1,000 scholarships to local high school seniors. We are a virtual clearinghouse for grassroots organizations by providing them with table space at no charge in our exhibit area. There are typically a dozen groups represented. If you are like-minded, join us at our next meeting and become motivated and empowered. Liberty, made in America.
And welcome back to the right side. That was a word from our underwriter, the Conservative Forum. And while we are tremendously appreciative of the support they give the show in making it possible, what they're best known for is the other stuff that they do. Things such as their speaker series, which is why we were lucky enough to have Evan on the show with us this evening. He will be speaking. The normal schedule of events is the first Tuesday of each month at 7 o'clock at 432 Steerland Road here in Mountain View, about 3 minutes away, at the IFES Portuguese Hall. The speakers will be there along with 300 to 500 conservatives. And I bet you didn't know there were that many in the Bay Area, let alone just in Mountain View in one evening. But in February, on the 4th, Victor Davis Hanson, an ever-popular speaker with the Forum, will be present. On March 4th, Greg Lukinoff, President and Foundation for Individual Rights and Education, or FIRE. And then in April, Dr. Bert Folsom, Hillsdale professor and well-known author. And then in May, we're expecting a packed house because Sheriff Joe Arpaio will be present. So if you do want to find out more about the forum and what's available in the speaker series, please go to theconservativeforum.com. And in closing, I think that it's extremely important that we do look at what Evan was discussing over the course of the show. Adopting someone, Democrat, liberal, or otherwise, and really helping to educate them about what's happening in the world. Many times people are too busy to really figure out what it is that's important and how it's going to impact their lives. And if people just spend a little bit of time to research, not only would they be scared out of their pants, but additionally, they would find out that maybe, just maybe, the thoughts that they've had up until this point may not be fully true. I mean, I'm converted as well. When I left high school, I think I was a Democrat because one of my teachers told me I was, along with the rest of the class, and we just believed him. It wasn't until I began to actually do things like read, research, think for myself, form coherent thoughts that I started to realize, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm not as liberal as I thought. Does it mean I'm not compassionate? Does it mean that I want to see my air and chew my water? Absolutely not. But what it does mean is I hadn't asked myself enough of the right questions yet to make an informed decision about what I really believed. So take Evan's advice. If you'd like, visit his website at evansayet.com and figure out if you are who you thought you were, and if you want to leave the people who you know who they thought they were as well. Have a great night. I've been your host, Chris Pareja, and this has been The Right Side.